Hi, welcome to another video from East Coast Fibreglass Supplies. Today we're going to show you how to sheathe plywood with polyester resin. This has just been dropped off by a customer of ours. It's a wooden construction for a wheelhouse for a boat. As you can see, we've put some filler along here and we've rounded off all the corners. The filler we've used is the EC42 that you can get from our fillers and adhesive section. Around the windows, where the window's been cut out, we've got some 1 inch by 1 inch timbers put in. They've been screwed in place and then the edges have been rounded off so that the fiberglass has something to form round and bond to. The reason why we put the radius on is because fiberglass doesn't really like sharp 90-degree corners. If you try to go around a sharp corner, all you'll be doing is fighting with the air, trying to push it from one side to the other, trying to get it out. So by putting a bit of a radius in, it allows the fiberglass just to bend a lot tidier around that corner. As you can see, there's a few screws here that are a bit proud of the surface, so we'll have to take them back out, countersink it and put them back in, and then we'll be filling off over the screw heads as well. Once all that's ready, we're going to give it a coat of 491 PA, which is an isophthalic polyester resin. We'll be thinning it down with 7% styrene so that it soaks into the timber. We'll be catalysing it and then applying it by brush. Once that resin is soaked in and it's cured off, it'll act as a primer, but then start applying the Lloyd's approved polyester resin and fiberglass, and that will secure a good bond to the primer, and the primer will be soaked into the timber, therefore there'll be less chance of delamination. We've countersunk the area for those screws. We've took them out and we've put them back in again so they're not protruding like they were before. We're just going to fill the heads up with some filler, a bit of the EC42 filler, a bit of hardener. Good mix in. Once that's cured off, we'll sand them down and then we'll get on with priming the timber. Alright, we're just giving all the timber a good wash down with acetone, just to make sure it's free from grease or any other contaminants. Trouble is with the plywood, you never know what conditions it's been stored in, or if the manufacturers have had any release agents or oils on there. It's a good idea to always give it a good wipe down with acetone. We've got our 491 resin, an isophthalic. We've got 300 mils in there. We're going to first add 7% styrene. The styrene is exactly the same colour as the catalyst, so be careful you don't get those mixed up. If you've got a workshop and you're using these chemicals all the time, if you go on our website on these catalyst dispensers, you'll notice we have them with different colour measurements on them as well, on the tops. So it's ideal if you've got different chemicals of the same colour, at least you can have different coloured caps on them. So we're going to put 7% styrene in. That's 7 mils for every 100 mil. So I'm going to put 21 mils of styrene. Always try and avoid mixing any of the products on the particular project that you're doing. If you're on your boat though and it's unavoidable, always make sure you have a little bit of board to work on. That's in case if you spill any catalyst, styrene or any other chemicals, it's not going to go on to the actual project. We've got that mixed. We're going to now add the catalyst. We're going to add 2%. If you're working in colder temperatures, you can add up to 3 and 4% just to speed things up a little bit. Ideally, you want your temperature to be at least above 10 degrees if you can, ideally around about 20 to 25 degrees. We're going to put 6 mils of catalyst in there. We're just going to coat the whole thing in our prime coat mixture. Now you notice there we added 7% styrene to the 491. You can, if you want to request us to do it, we'll actually mix it in for you to make the prime coat. So all you have to do is give it a mix and then put your catalyst in. Alright, we're going to start with fiberglassing now. What we're going to do first is use strips of chopped strand mat, 450 gram, just to reinforce all the corners, all the areas around the window, just everywhere there's a join that needs extra reinforcement. We're just going to concentrate on those areas. It also allows us to concentrate on these radiused areas as well, so that when we do the main body of the project, we have the large sheets of fiberglass, we're not concentrating too much on one area and having a lot of resin going off while we're trying to wet out the rest of it. So we're just going to do the detailed areas first and let those cure off, and then we'll do the main body of the project. I'm going to use a Lloyd's approved polyester resin. The one we're going to use is a white because the finished project we want to be in white, so we're going to use a white flow coat to finish it. It's a good idea to pigment the resin the same colour as what your flow coat's going to be that you put on. That way, if you have to rub down any areas and you rub a little bit too far towards the resin, it's not going to be a different colour. So it gives you that little bit more leeway for rubbing back. On some boats, a lot of people are just happy just painting straight on with the flow coat and just living with the brush marks that's on there off the flow coat. If you want a much better finish, after you've fiberglassed, use a few layers of gel coat first, apply with a roller, and then finish with a flow coat with a roller as well. That'll give you a much better finish to the project. But we'll show you that process as we go on. So this is the mat that we're going to use. A good tip when you're laminating on corners is to take your strip and just crease it down the middle. You want about 2 to 3 inches either side of the join. So I've got a good, roughly about 5 to 6 inch strip here. I'm just creasing it down the middle, and that will allow that corner just to form a lot nicer when we come to put it on the project. Just going to do a small batch of resin. I'm just going to do a small section to show you, and then eventually we'll be covering the rest of it. So I've just getting 250 mils of resin and about 2% catalyst, which equals to about 5 mils. I'm just going to wet the area out first. Wet the mat out with more resin. Use a stipple action rather than brushing it, as if you brush it you're going to disturb the fibres and move them about, so it's always recommended to stipple it. After about 30 seconds the resin will start breaking down the binder in the mat and it'll form a lot easier and the sheet of mat will become more malleable. Then take your paddle roller. The paddle roller is an aluminium ribbed roller, and this allows to consolidate the mat. A lot of people think they can just use the brush or a resin roller just to roll it out, to flatten it out, but you always end up with a lot of trapped air underneath and that you don't realise is there. This gets rid of all the air and makes sure that you've got a good consolidation to either the other layers of mat underneath or your resin or whatever it is that you're sheathing with the fiberglass. It also flattens out the fibres, brings a lot of excess resin to the surface, and that will level out and give you a much better finished area to work with and overcoat as well. Right, we've got all the corners reinforced, all the seams and all the edges as well. Now we've done around the window frame, so we know that's all neat and tidy and sanded and all squared off. So now we're going to do the main body. First of all, you need to remove any dust after you've sanded it. It's important to sand it as well. Get rid of all the splinters that you'll have on the corners and give it a wipe down with acetone. First thing we're going to put on is the chopped strand mat, using the 450 gram. I've got that roughly cut to size, just a little bit over. You could apply it as it is, but rather than have a straight edge where you're going to have a bit of a step, it's best to just tear it into shape. By tearing it, you get a nice feathered edge, and that blends in a lot better than a straight cut edge. And because we've already reinforced the corners, it doesn't matter if you tear it a little bit short, because you're not going to lose any strength because there's already fibres there. I've estimated that we're going to need around about just over a kilo for that area. It's just over a square metre. And we'll just allow a little bit extra for the surface tissue as well. So I'm going to put 2% catalyst in, which is going to be 20 mils. I'm going to use a nylon roller to apply the resin. Give the area an initial coat. And we'll wet the mat out with more resin. Make sure you've got good saturation of the fibres, there's no dry areas. Take our paddle roller again. Right, we're going to put the tissue layer on now. This will get rid of that horrible rough chopped strand look. Take that in for the overlaps. Sometimes the tissue might grab the roller a bit like that. Just let that drop. Just put a bit more resin over the top. I'm just going to go around the edges of the brush and just tidy it up a bit. Around all the, especially around the frame, just tucking the tissue under, tucking into the corners. Just blend in where the overlaps are. Right, so we've finished the fiberglass and the tissuing, and we've also added a coat of gel coat. Now, gel coat when it cures remains tacky, so it's not the ideal product for a final coating. So we're now going to put a coat of what's known as flowcoat in onto the actual surface. Flowcoat is exactly the same as gel coat, except it's got 2% wax and styrene added to it, and it helps it cure without that tack finish. You can add your own 2% wax and styrene to the gel coat to make your own flowcoat, but we do it ready-made. When you do receive the flowcoat, it's always a good idea to mix the tin well to make sure that the wax is agitated back into the gel coat, because it will separate in transit. And then you can add the hardener and then apply. So you could just apply the flowcoat on top of the fiberglass and leave that as your finish. But remember, flowcoat can only be applied as the final last coat. You can't put a flow coat on top of another flow coat because of the wax that's in it. It will prohibit the further bond. So if you want to build up layers to then rub back and bring to a smooth, highly polished finish, you will have to build up the layers with gel coat first to get a good height, and then finish with a flow coat. So now we're going to add the hardener to a batch of flow coat and apply that by a brush to this. So we've added 2% catalyst, exactly the same as what we put into the resin. Colder temperatures you might want to add 3 or 4%. Check on the tins, there's a catalyst addition chart. Down one side it'll give you percentage of catalyst. Gel coat always starts at 2%, unlike resin where you can sometimes get away with putting 1% in if you've got higher temperatures. Across here it'll give you the addition, the temperature. So it'll have 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, and it'll give you roughly the kind of time scale that you'd expect the curing to be. The times on there are approximate. Start from the top of the project and work your way down. That way if you do drip down the sides, you can then blend them in. Because we're going white onto white, I'm going to keep the brush strokes nice and even to ensure that we haven't missed any areas. Try to avoid going in all different directions because then that will just make the finish look quite bad. As I say, just try and keep the brush strokes nice and uniform and even. And if you've got good working temperatures, the viscosity of the gel coat will just thin out a little bit, and you'll find that it'll level a lot better than what it will in cold temperatures.